Welcome back, everybody. I'm just switching gears again here. Y'all remember that show called Goodfellas about the mafia and everything? Well, here's something they never showed you at the end of the show and everything, and how some of the people remember that. Okay, in the Goodfellas, remember that car, the pink Cadillac? Well, it's based on a true story. The whole show, Goodfellas, is based on a true story. Every single one was based on a true story. So yeah. While Lewis and John Coffin thought they got away with it, December 11th, 1978. Unfortunately, they did not make it. They actually got killed in broad daylight, and nobody did nothing about it, not the cops or anything. And their body disappeared. So we'll go ahead and get into the video here and show you why the mafia was something you shouldn't fucking play around with, even to this day. So let's go ahead and get into the video, shall we?
8th of March, 1979. A white Cadillac Fleetwood vanished from a quiet Brooklyn street. And in it, Louis Kafora, 300 pounds of paranoia, and his wife Joanna, 26 years old, blonde, and blissfully unaware of what her husband had done. They disappeared in broad daylight. No witnesses, no bodies, no car. Poof, gone. This was no accident. Louis Kafora was one of the masterminds behind the biggest cash robbery in American history just 3 months prior. $6 million from Lufthansa Airlines at JFK Airport. The score of a lifetime. But Louis made a series of grave errors. And in Jimmy Burke's world, mistakes got you killed. Quietly, permanently, with no trace left behind. This is the story of the Christmas party couple from Goodfellas. The pink Cadillac couple, the ones who thought they were partying, the ones who were already dead, but didn't know it yet. This is what really happened to the rule breakers after the Lufthansa heist, and how Jimmy the Gent became the most feared man in New York. But here's what the movie didn't tell you. Louis Kafora was no simple-minded thug with a penchant for pink Cadillacs. He was a drug dealer who'd been laundering money for years. He owned front companies for parking lots in downtown Brooklyn. He'd done time with Jimmy Burke in federal prison, where they'd become close. Close enough that Burke trusted him with millions. And Louis had repaid that trust in ways that ensured his own death sentence. The pink Cadillac was only the start of it. You have to understand something about Jimmy Burke. This man did not have a temper. He was a calculated man, a strategic man. When he decided that you were going to have to go, it was because you had become a liability that he could no longer afford. And after Lufthansa, everyone had become a liability. The crew that pulled off the heist, Burke took them out, one by one. 7 people dead in 7 months. Louis and Joanna Kafora were just 2 names on a list of people that Burke was systematically checking off. It began in December of 1978, the 11th. 3 in the morning. 7 masked men entered the Lufthansa cargo building at Kennedy Airport, armed with shotguns and pistols. They knew exactly where they were going. The shift changes, because Louis Werner, a Lufthansa cargo agent deep in debt from his gambling habit, had given them a blueprint. Werner owed a bookmaker named Martin Krugman $20,000. Krugman knew Henry Hill. Hill knew Jimmy Burke. And Burke saw an opportunity that was too good to pass up. The crew worked quickly. They took 9 hostages from Lufthansa, tied them up in the lunchroom, forced the cargo manager to open the double-door vault system without sounding the alarm. Inside, 72 boxes of untraceable cash, $5 million, and $875,000 of jewelry. They got everything into a black Ford Econoline van in under 90 minutes. By 4:30 in the morning, they were gone. The largest cash heist in United States history at the time. Clean, professional, perfect, except it didn't. The van was supposed to disappear. Parnell Stacks Edwards, a low-level guy who ran errands for Burke's crew, had one job. Drive the van to a Gambino-connected junkyard in New Jersey, smash it, destroy the evidence. Instead, Stacks drove to his girlfriend's apartment in Brooklyn, did cocaine, and fell asleep. The van was parked outside for 2 days. A cop spotted it parked too close to a fire hydrant. Ran the plates. Stolen. The van was impounded. Stack's fingerprints were all over it. Within 72 hours, the FBI knew exactly who they were looking for. Jimmy Burke lost it, not in public, that wasn't his way, but in Robert's Lounge, his bar in South Ozone Park, the temperature plummeted. Burke told all of his crew the same thing: lay low. Don't spend the money. Don't buy anything conspicuous. Don't tell anyone about the heist. Not your wife, not your girlfriend, not your mother, nobody. The FBI was watching. Every move, every purchase, every conversation. One misstep and the whole thing would blow. Louis Kafora heard the warning. He just didn't listen. This is who Louis Kafora was before everything went south. Born and raised in South Ozone Park, Queens. A neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, and half of them were connected. Louis wasn't a made man. He was an associate. But he was useful. He ran a marijuana and cocaine trafficking ring that brought in big bucks, tons of it. He used his parking lot businesses in Brooklyn to launder cash, legitimate fronts that washed dirty money so well that the IRS never gave it a second glance. Burke knew this. That's why he hired Louis to launder the Lufthansa cash, trusted him to move millions through his system without leaving a paper trail. Louis weighed 300 pounds. They nicknamed him Roast Beef, sometimes the Whale. He was loud, indiscreet, the type of guy who talked too much in bars and boasted about things he should have kept to himself. But he was a man of his word. At least, that's what Burke believed. Louis and Burke had been cellmates years before in federal prison on extortion charges. Mob prison loyalties run deep. You do time with a guy, you trust him, you share a cell, you're brothers. Burke knew Louis would never betray him. He was wrong. December 24th, 1978, 2 weeks after Lufthansa, Robert's Lounge celebrated Christmas. The whole team was there. The place was jammed. Mobsters, their wives, their girlfriends, the Ronettes playing on the jukebox. The drinks were flowing. Everyone was celebrating because they'd just pulled off the impossible. $6 million. And the FBI had nothing. No arrests, no leads. Just a black van with fingerprints belonging to a dead man. Because 7 days after the heist, Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Sepe walked into Stax Edwards' apartment and shot him 5 times in the head. Point blank. Right in the middle of dinner. Chicken still in his mouth. Burke's first body, first message, screw up and die. But the party wasn't about Stax. It was about success. Victory. The biggest score in mob history. Henry Hill came in wearing a red velvet jacket. Tommy DeSimone pranced around in his signature spearpoint collar. Frankie Carbone's girlfriend showed up wearing a brand new mink coat. Costly, flashy, exactly what Burke had told them not to do. But the worst offender came in last. Louis Kafora, grinning, sweating, 300 pounds of excitement barely contained. And behind him, his wife, Joanna, 26, blonde, beautiful. Wearing a brand new fur coat and a diamond necklace that screamed money, Louis grabbed Jimmy Burke by the arm, pulled him outside, and showed him the car. A 1979 Cadillac Fleetwood, factory fresh, white exterior, pink interior, custom ordered, cost $15,000. Parked right outside Robert's Lounge under the streetlights where anyone could see it. FBI surveillance vans included. Burke's face didn't change. That was the terrifying part. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, just looked at the car, looked at Louis, and said one word: congratulations. Then he walked back inside. Louis thought he'd gotten away with it. He had no idea he'd just signed his own death warrant. This is what Louis didn't get. Jimmy Burke wasn't concerned about the car. He was concerned about what the car symbolized: visibility, noticeability. The kind of attention that leads to people going to jail. Burke had been living in the dark for decades. He stole millions, but he lived a humble life. Drove a '77 Buick, wore plain suits. Nothing to draw attention to himself. That was how you stayed alive. That was how you stayed out of the FBI's crosshairs. But Louis parked a $15,000 Cadillac outside a known mob hotspot 2 weeks after the largest robbery in American history. Every Fed within a 10-mile radius saw that car, and they began to ask questions. But the Cadillac was only the tip of the iceberg. It was the most noticeable of Louis's errors. The problem was Joanna, Louis's wife, the woman he married in secret, the woman he loved, the woman he told everything to, and that was a death sentence. Because in the Mafia, you never told your wife about business, ever. Wives were civilians. They didn't understand the code. They talked to their friends. They gossiped. They made mistakes. That was why made men kept their families separate from their business. Clean lines, no blurring. Louis Kafora broke all of these rules. He told Joanna about Lufthansa. He told her about the heist. He told her what his part in it was. He bragged about how much money they stole. He showed her the cash he was laundering through his parking lots. And Joanna, young and naive, didn't have a clue what she was getting herself into. She thought it was sexy, romantic. Her husband, the mobster, living the life. She didn't know that every time Louis opened his mouth to her, he was hammering nails into both of their coffins. Burke found out. Of course he did. In the mob, everyone talks. Informants, wiretaps, loose lips in bars. By January of 1979, Burke knew that Louis Kafora was running his mouth to his wife, to his friends, to anyone who'd listen, and, to make matters worse, Louis was driving that goddamn white Cadillac all over Brooklyn, including near the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK, where the FBI had set up surveillance. They photographed the car, ran the plates, traced it back to Louis Kafora, and suddenly, Louis went from trusted associate to federal target. Burke made the call in February. Louis had to go. But it wasn't just about the car or the talking. Louis was also skimming, taking more than his share of the money he was supposed to be laundering. Burke had given him hundreds of thousands to clean through the parking lots. Louis was keeping chunks of it, buying jewelry, fancy dinners, paying off debts, living large. That was theft. And in Burke's world, stealing from the boss was a death sentence. But Louis knew he was in trouble. By late February, he was scared, paranoid. He stopped showing up at Robert's Lounge, stopped taking Burke's calls. And then he made his final, desperate move. He contacted the FBI, tried to become an informant, offered to testify about Lufthansa in exchange for witness protection. For him and Joanna, he thought it was his only way out. What he didn't realize was that the mob always finds out. Someone at the FBI talked, or Burke had a source. Either way, by early March, Jimmy Burke knew that Louis Kafora was trying to flip. That sealed it. Louis wasn't just a liability anymore. He was an active threat, a rat in the making. And rats don't get second chances. The 8th of March, 1979, Joanna Kafora left her apartment in Brooklyn. Louis was with her. They got into the white Cadillac. Joanna thought they were going to dinner. Louis knew better. He'd been summoned. Burke wanted to meet, talk things out, settle the situation. Louis knew what that meant, but he went anyway. Because in the mob, when the boss calls, you answer. Refusing is an admission of guilt, and guilt gets you killed faster than anything else. They never made it to dinner. Somewhere between Joanna's apartment and wherever Burke told them to go, the Cadillac was intercepted, forced off the road. Or maybe Louis drove to the meeting spot willingly. The details died with them. What's certain is this. Louis and Joanna Kafora were never seen again. No phone calls, no sightings, no bodies, just gone. Henry Hill, who would later testify to the Lufthansa heists, said that Burke had Louis and Joanna Kafora murdered together. Then he had their bodies put back in the white Cadillac. And the whole car, with the two bodies inside, was driven to an auto wreck yard in Brooklyn, Clyde Brooks's Auto Bargain Scrapyard in Starrett City, a place where stolen cars and evidence regularly went to disappear. The Cadillac was put into an industrial compactor. The compactor crushed the car into a cube of metal about 3 feet on each side. Louis and Joanna Kafora, along with their $15,000 symbol of stupidity, were compacted into scrap metal. Then the cube was melted down, smelted, reduced to raw material, sold, recycled, erased from existence. That's the tale Henry Hill told, and it rings true. Burke was a fan of symbolic murders. The couple who flaunted their riches got smashed with their riches. Mob justice at its finest. But here's the thing. Nobody ever discovered the bodies. No remains, no bones, no car parts. Nothing. To this day, Louis and Joanna Kafora are registered as missing persons, presumed dead, but never proven. Some researchers think Hill's account was only partially true, that Louis and Joanna were murdered, but perhaps not in the car, perhaps individually. Perhaps the bodies were disposed of in different spots. The ocean, construction sites, dumpsters. New York has a million places to hide a body. And Burke knew them all. He'd been hiding bodies since the 1960s. He was a pro, so perhaps the compactor legend was just that. A myth with a nice ring to it, but no basis in fact. Or perhaps it was exactly what had occurred. Either way, the Kaforas were out of the picture. For good. The killing didn't end there. Louis and Joanna were merely 2 of the 9 people with ties to the robbery who ended up dead or missing in the 7 months following the heist. Parnell Stacks Edwards, shot 5 times in the head. Martin Krugman, dismembered, body never found. Robert McMahon and Joe Buddha Munry, found in a parked car in Brooklyn, both shot execution style, back of the head. Paolo Licastri, Gambino family drug trafficker, found naked and burned on a trash heap. Teresa Ferrara, occasional girlfriend of crew members, headless torso washed up on a New Jersey beach. And then there was Tommy DeSimone, Burke's most loyal hitman, the man who'd killed Stacks, Edwards, and many others. Tommy believed he was invincible. He wasn't. In January of 1979, Tommy was invited to a meeting with the Gambino family. He believed he was being inducted as a full member of the Mafia. But instead, John Gotti himself shot him in the head. Retribution for murders Tommy had committed years before without permission. Burke didn't save him, didn't try to stop it, because by then, Tommy knew too much. His death was convenient. One less witness, one less problem. By the summer of 1979, Jimmy Burke had taken out nearly all of the Lufthansa players. The only high-ranking member left alive was Henry Hill, and Hill was smart enough to know that he was next. When Burke began to act like he was his friend, too friendly, Hill knew. He'd seen that before, right before people vanished. So in April of 1980, when Hill was arrested on unrelated drug charges, he made a decision. He turned, went into witness protection, testified against Burke and Paul Vario, spilled everything to the FBI. Names, dates, murders, schemes, the entire Lucchese crime family organization. It was the biggest mob betrayal in decades. But even with Hill's testimony, the prosecutors still couldn't charge Burke with the Lufthansa heist. No bodies, no evidence, no money recovered. The case was closed. Burke had accomplished exactly what he'd planned to do, silenced every man who could put him away. The only man convicted of a crime related to the Lufthansa heist was Louis Werner, the mole. The Lufthansa employee with the gambling problem. He got 15 years. Everyone else either died or went free. Burke eventually ended up in prison anyway, not for Lufthansa, for the murder of Richard Eaton, one of the Florida businessmen, and for a Boston College point-shaving scheme he'd been running on the side. He died in prison in 1996, lung cancer. Never admitted to Lufthansa, never confessed. Took the secrets to his grave. The $6 million? Never recovered. Some say Burke buried it, or stashed it offshore, or spent it over the years. No one knows. Some of it probably got lost in the shuffle. Some paid off the Lucchese family as tribute. Some paid for lawyers and bribes. But most of it just vanished. Like Louis and Joanna Kafora. Like the white Cadillac. Like everyone who touched that money. The pink Cadillac in Goodfellas is fiction. The real car was white with a pink interior, but Scorsese made it fully pink for the movie. More visual, more symbolic. A car so garish, so absurdly over the top, that it became a perfect